Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Cressy. I'm the new chair of TCHC's Board Governance, Communications, and Human Resources Committee. Welcome to the public session of today's committee meeting, which is taking place virtually via WebEx. We were just having a conversation before the public meeting about our intention and hopes to be in a hybrid format for those who wish to join in person at our next session and going forward. Before we begin the land acknowledgement in the meeting, just as the first time in a public session as a new member of the board and the chair, I just want to, as I did in private session, I want to extend deepest thanks on behalf of all of us on this committee to Brian, who's still here and cannot get away because we won't let him, but for serving as the chair of this committee for so many years and doing so admirably. And so I thank you to Brian for all of that work and for still being here, even though you have passed the reins. So thank you. For me personally, it is a privilege to be here. I was on the board of Toronto Community Housing from 2014 to 18. And like many of you, I adore TCH. TCH is about more than buildings, it's about people. And when TCH succeeds and our residents succeed, the city succeeds. And that's what this work is about. And in the context of this committee, I would just say, my approach as a member alongside so many of you fellow committee members is one of collaboration and respect. We make better decisions when we work closely together. And frankly, we have more fun doing so when we respect each other, we respect the deputants, and we respect staff. And that's a collaborative and respectful model. So with that, let me begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting. This is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. During the public session, I should note we have 4 reports being brought forward for the committee's information, and we have 1 report seeking the committee and board's approval regarding the board and committee chairs and chair and vice chair mandates. So let's begin, first of all, on the declaration around conflicts of interest. Would any members of the Governance, Communications, and Human Resources Committee please indicate any item in which you have a conflict of interest, along with the nature of that conflict? So just looking for a show of hands if anybody has a conflict. And for those on the phone, feel free to speak. Okay, seeing none stated, so no conflict of interest were declared for any agenda item. So now I'll look for an agenda run through. You all have the agendas in front of you. I'll go through to see if, let me just caucus members of the committee, are there any items on which committee members would like to hold it down? And I'll note that we have a deputant listed speaking to items 7, 9, and 10. So items 7, 9, and 10 are being held down already. So let me just see if any other items on the agenda, that includes 4, 5, 6, and 8. Any members of the committee like to hold any of those down? Okay, seeing none, then on this, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the recommendations and the reports on the public agenda, except for the 3 items that are held down. Would somebody be willing to move that? Thank you, Councillor Cheng. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay, so that carries. So then the 3 items we have on our agenda is item 7, item 9, and item 10. I should note, and this was circulated, members of the committee, you should have received yesterday, but we do have a deputant listed speaking to each of those 3 items. So we'll deal with each item and hear from the deputant first. So if we can begin with item 7, this is the deputation policy for stakeholders. It's an information item. And if members of the TCH staff team could open up the mic for Catherine Wilkinson. Catherine, if she's here. Catherine, we haven't seen each other in many years since we were on the board together. That seems like a lifetime ago. So nice to see you again. Catherine, you know this better than me, better than any, I know. So you'll have 5 minutes, and we're delighted to have you here to depute. So you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much and welcome back. I guess I can't call you Councillor Cressy at this point, but I'll call you Chair Cressy. Welcome back and thank you for, putting your name forward to continue to serve this corporation and improve services for tenants living in social housing. So welcome back. With regards to item 7, deputation policy for stakeholders, look, for the most part, I'm fine with the report that, Dara's put forward. I do have a couple of comments. So while the shareholders agreement requires Toronto Housing to hold tenant consultations on policies that affect tenants, this obligation is being met with the proposed 2 tenant roundtables in the report. Here you will have the absolute subject matter experts in tenants who have the lived experience of deputing before this board and would be the most appropriate partners at the table. On page 3 of 4 in your report, it indicates that governance staff have requested the addition of the TCHC's deputation policy to the agenda of an upcoming meeting of the Tenant Advisory Committee. And so this is my point. I actually think this is premature. The Tenant Advisory Committee is a brand new group whose mandate is to advise on the tenant engagement system, other tenant-facing programs, review funding requests. They'll have quite a large agenda. And they will likely review things related to tenant engagement, like the Tenant Rep Code of Conduct, volunteer policies, funding policies, specific to engagement. The deputation policy for stakeholders, as we know, is actually owned by the board and applies to external stakeholders, as well as tenants and our employees. It is a corporate governance policy that is outside of tenant engagement per se. Historically, some people may recall, we used to have quite a few external stakeholders coming before the board and the committees. These were people from legal clinics, that serve our tenants and social service agencies. And I'm not sure how or what outreach we can do to get some feedback from them to understand why they stopped coming forward. And it could be useful information for us going forward. It's up to the communications department really and governance to ensure the tenants are aware of the deputation policy and how they can participate. My recommendation is we wait and hear the recommendations of the 2 tenant roundtables around next steps and until the policy has been approved. At that point, strictly from an outreach perspective, it may be more appropriate to have the Tenant Advisory Committee consider how to get more tenants actively involved in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Let me just see and open up members of the committee. Any questions for Catherine? I'm seeing none. Catherine, thank you for your deputation. So we'll move this into committee on the item. Open it up. Any questions for staff or comments? I know we don't follow the formal questions first, then comments, but open it up. Questions or comments on this item?
I have one.
Yeah, please, Marcel.
Do you know when the actual first tenant advisory committee meeting is actually taking place?
So through the chair, sorry, I'll start, and then Nadia, I think you'll be able, you can add. I believe the work in terms of scheduling those meetings is continuing, and it may, for the committee's benefit, it may inform if we are going to consult with the tenant advisory committee in connection with his policy. It may inform the timeline that we will follow when bringing this back to the committee, if we're going to engage that group as part of our tenant engagement process. Nadia?
Thank you for the question, Director Charlebois, and through the chair. We are hoping to have the first orientation session with the Tenant Advisory Committee by the end of July. So invitation should be coming out ideally by Monday. So you should hear from the committee in terms of supporting that work moving forward. So there'll be a session in July, a session in August, with the hope that we'll have September being the first formal agenda with the group.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And then just to add to the comment from Ms. Wilkinson, in drafting the report, we anticipated that it would be the board's expectation that we would consult with the Tenant Advisory Committee. I believe their terms of reference are in the process of being established, and should it, based on the terms of reference for the committee that are established, be appropriate to include them in a consultation process, we'll do so.
A question.
Yeah, I have Brian and then Lily.
Are all the tenant board members automatically on the advisory committee?
Yes, they are.
And Lily?
I'm wondering if there's also a greater survey to the tenant community at large. I see we're being surveyed and then we're convening a roundtable, but I wonder if there's ways to get more voices.
So through the chair, in 2021 and through 2022, one of the steps that we took was to adopt formal rules procedure for the board that addressed to some extent the deputation process. And as a result of undertaking that process, we undertook 2 virtual forums with tenants who had deputed previously to the board about the manner in which we manage deputations at the board. I think we can inform the recommendations that we make about the policy based on those, the results that we received from the forum that we undertook at that time. But to your question, I think this is an item in the context of which more consultation is better. So we can absolutely look into the process of whether we could supplement what we've identified in the report with a survey. Yeah, we can absolutely look at that.
And I think, the survey has to go in hand with education, right? So I know in the previous community that I served in, a TCHC community, a lot of people are just overwhelmed with so many challenges, that, even navigating the system is very difficult for their personal lives. So in order to engage them, so you have people who regularly make deputations and they are very educated in the process. They know how to arrive at this moment and be here when we open the lines. But there are a significant, I think, group of people who probably have no idea what a board does, how they can participate, why they should participate. And so to me, this is kind of the crux of how we best represent the tenant community is by enlarging the circle, empowering people to have pathways to participate. So I know, having an advisory committee is important, but even then, I'm not sure there's so many people who might not even know such an advisory exists. So I think there's client coordinators in every community. And if there was simply, even to ask them to put up a poster, I think postering is still a highly used way to communicate to the community. And if there was a poster that explained, like, did you know you can, shape how TCHC is run by deputing or speaking at board meetings, and we are taking a survey now to figure out how we can accommodate your voice the best. Here's a QR code, scan it and fill out a survey. Suddenly we have a wider pool of voices who maybe even didn't know this pathway existed for them. So that's just a suggestion as someone who has postered a TCHC community multiple times. Like it is, I don't, I mean, the best way of community engagement is going door to door, which I've also done, but if, you know, obviously that takes a different kind of staffing capacity, but just postering in the community to let people know they have this way to give input would, I think, help us to have even more voices at the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. And Brian? I think you're just on mute there, Brian.
Just agree with Lily, but it's a huge issue, and I think something that we should probably talk about in our strategic planning as we come out. How do we engage tenants more effectively? Because that's, you know, with 110,000 tenants, it's not a simple job, and you know, 58,000 units. You know, it's you know, so when I was working and you were working in much smaller communities, it's a lot easier to do it, but on the scale that we have, you know, it becomes quite daunting as a process. But I think it's an important area that we should talk about a lot more and figure out how to do it better as part of our strategic planning.
And I have Marcel, and then I have myself.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I went to because I'm also the tenant rep for 470 Melita, and I went to the action table yesterday at 150 River Street. I think this is just my opinion, but I think the best way for TCHC and the board to have like better engagement and have tenants become more involved is to have open and honest communication, because the resources and the information and the wealth of experience that TCHC can benefit is sitting at those tables with the tenant reps. They know their communities, they know what works, what doesn't work. And if things are going to be better and be more open dialogue and, you know, make things prosperous for everyone, it starts at those tables. But I agree with both of you. That's it.
Thanks, Marcel. Ziva?
Yeah, I just want to add another challenge, because I also do community work. Some of the challenges is language as well. So I personally live in a Revi community. So when I do ask my neighbors, you know, they speak English, but sometimes when it comes to like literacy and comprehension written wise, they wouldn't be able to understand what they're reading. But if you're having a conversation with them, they would best comprehend what you're trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that there's a language barrier, because TCHC is also a newcomer, also community as well. So sometimes interacting with residents, if it's written communication, could sometimes be a challenge. And I'm just using the revite that's going on in our community and asking them what they think or how they feel about the situation. And some of them are like, I didn't even know that was existing. But I'm like, you see, like on the other side, there's like huge construction, right? So it's like in your face. So I think that's one of the things that we should be doing, is maybe have more language-based material that we could engage some residents, and hopefully that would give us an increase of residents who are or tenants who would like to be a part of the advisory committee.
Thank you.
And then so I put myself on here, and so first I'm happy to move the recommendation, because I know this is an update on the status, and the policy is going to be coming back, and based on the consultations, and looking forward to receiving it in the future. And I think just to comment, building on the conversation we've had here as a committee around the table, is, you know, this principle within Toronto Community Housing of decision making that is both open and accountable, not just throughout the organization, but at the board level as well. That's sort of the principle. And I know when we're speaking about the deputation policy, you know, building on what Lily said, you know, listen, it's about creating more than a space for people to speak. It's about breaking down barriers so that people are able to speak, you know, and it can be very daunting to come in front of a board and speak in a formal agenda. And so how we break down the barriers to make it more accessible and how we facilitate that at a board level in the context of deputations, we can always do better. And our decisions become better when we do. So I think I know part of the conversation here went into the broader discourse around how do we open up engagement writ large in the organization. And I think, as Brian said, as part of the strategic plan, we need to always review and do better there. But I think the feedback I would just encourage at this information point here today for our exceptional staff is in the development of this deputation policy. I think you're hearing from the committee, the more accessible, the more we can break down barriers, the more we can make the bureaucratic, corporate, nature of coming and speaking to a board more open to inform better outcomes. I think the better. And so look, I'm happy to move the recommendation here, and very much looking forward to the report coming back. And I think we all have a sense of where we'd like to go collectively when it does. But most importantly, we'll hear from our residents and the tenants over the course of the development of it. So,
Thank you.
so with that, and can I just see anybody else with comments or questions? Otherwise, we do have I'm happy to move the recommendation on the table here. All right, so seeing none, so move the recommendation, and thank you everybody for the comments. I think looking forward to the report back. I think we'll have a very good conversation. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. All right, so we'll move then, we have two other items. We'll move to item number 9, the annual compliance report for 2022. We do have a report there from our CEO. I believe we have Catherine deputing on this item as well. If we can bring Catherine back into the virtual room. Catherine, welcome again. And so and Catherine, from your last conversation, Chair Cressy is not necessary. Joe is fine. That goes for everybody. I keep trying to tell Dara this. It's Joe. So still too old, too young for a title, I should say. So Catherine, you have 5 minutes when you're ready.
So Joe, thank you for that. I will do so.
Good.
Yeah. So I've spoken to this item before about the annual compliance reporting under previous boards, and in fact, Joe may have been on some of those boards when these discussions took place. The board directed management to report back on compliance issues that were beyond financial compliance. Because as we know, new legislation has arisen, such as the AODA, Accessibility for Ontarians Disabilities Act. And the other piece that we comply with is MFIPA, the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And those were two compliance areas that the CEO had committed to ensuring would be on future compliance certificates presented to the governance committee. So there was a request from the board on multiple occasions. There was confirmation from the CEO that would be done. And here we are years later, and it still is not being included on the compliance report. I think the previous board did their due diligence. New legislation come out. There was a compliance requirement, and accordingly directed management to, keep them informed to ensure we were in compliance. We're publicly funded. We have a responsibility to provide accessible, transparent reporting. And in so doing, to be held accountable to the shareholder and the stakeholders. So my recommendation is rather repetitive because it's come before multiple boards and been accepted and passed. And so I'm going to try one more time that the governance committee consider directing staff to provide the annual compliance certificate information beyond financial requirements. So that would include the AODA and the MFIPA reporting, or there may be other areas of legislation that come around that the corporation has to be compliant with. So that is just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Any questions for Catherine? Brian, is that a question for Catherine?
No, well, no, yes and no. My question may be more to you or to Lily.
Okay. So questions for Catherine, because I heard a yes or a no, but then it was a no. Any questions for Catherine? All right, so we'll move this into committee. Thank you, Catherine. Brian, please go ahead.
Well, actually, Kathy may know the answer, but the question is how does the city handle those two? Because I'm sure they have to meet that compliance as well. And I know we had a long discussion about the AODA with regards to documents and the challenges around that. And we've been working on trying to figure out how to do that. I know it's not perfect, and Catherine had some discussions with JAG on that aspect, but I guess my question is obviously if the city has found ways to meet those requirements, we should learn from them. And if they haven't, then we're both struggling to try and find ways to address it. Not that it needs to be addressed, just a question of you know, our capacity to be able to do it.
Sarah, is there you are a member of the team that can speak to the question of some of the other legislative compliance matters and how and if they're addressed here or at the city?
I'm not sure that I can speak to the city's experience, but I can offer that in relation to INFIPA compliance, we submit annually a report to the Information and Privacy Commissioner that through which we confirm our compliance with Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act requirements. The AODA, or Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, also has compliance obligations that we have recently reported through our annual report to our shareholder that we are compliant with. And so perhaps what we can offer is to confirm either through a review of the compliance reporting that we provide the city as shareholder in our annual our annual report, that the compliance certificate that we provide to the board in future reflects those same areas. To address Ms. Wilkinson's comment. So what we would then do is just confirm where we're outlining to our shareholder in our annual report. Here is our compliance measures that we're providing that same information to the board through this document.
But Dara, if I may, the issue with regards to providing information, I think this was a concern that Catherine had in previous presentation to committee and discussion with regards to the challenges of making some of the documents or reports that are back accessible 100% rather than on a as requested basis. I think that was the issue.
And I believe that is an issue that we continue to consider, how we can best comply with that. The advice we've received from the ministry responsible for the oversight of the AODA is that the approach that we have taken is compliant with our statutory requirements. The question I think that is raised in the context of this issue is whether we should be including on our board web or on the TCHC website information with respect to past board and committee meetings historically, how long a period of information we should include, and how we do that in a manner that is AODA compliant. So the information that is giving rise to this conversation relates to what's on the website. I can confirm that the information that's on the website is AODA compliant. The question is how much information in relation to past meetings should there be there? And we continue to deal with that question. But understood.
Thanks. I just everybody understands the challenges that we have internally, not that we don't want to achieve it.
Yep.
Okay, and listen, for my part, and the report as it's set out, I'm from our CEO, I'm very comfortable with. I think as per this conversation, and this is where I may have been on the board years past, but I feel like the new kid on the block as I'm here again is, you know, ensuring that any various legislative compliance matters that are not included within this annual report, that they are available and made available to the board at other points in time. It's, for me, it's making sure that we have the information we need on an as needed basis, certainly over the course of the year. And so, Darren, I heard you there. I mean, I think, you know, I don't feel we need a formal motion to direct or anything. It's, if staff identify any legislative compliance matters that are being provided to the shareholder that may in another form be provided to the board, I think that would be very helpful. You know, a couple have been listed here around AODA or an MFIPA, which come through other streams. So, you know, I think with that review and that collective desire to have the items when we need them, I'm comfortable.
Thank you.
All right. Anything, anybody else on this item? Okay, it is an information item, so I will happy to move the recommendation to receive the report for information. And there is a conversation here and staff undertaking on some other pieces related to it. So that's great. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that carries. Our final item here is item 10, City Council directions requiring board attention. I will admit, when I went through them, I saw my name attached to a number of former directions back in the day. And Catherine, I believe you're speaking on this item as well. So we will throw the mic back to you. You have, as you know, up to 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Yes, so, you know, I've been monitoring, this is an excellent report. I can't reiterate that enough. So thank you to the communications staff and to Darren and his group for making sure that the board is kept apprised. There's a lot of things happening at City Hall that may impact Toronto Community Housing. So it's an invaluable report for the board to have so that they can anticipate, you know, future needs. Be they financial or, you know, staffing resources to handle what requests may come forward. So I've been monitoring a particular member's motion that was on this list. Some of you may recall. It was pertaining to taking action to protect tenants from extreme heat. Now, that was on the April report, but it has since been removed. This is the second time it's been removed, and the second time I'm requesting it be put back. The item has not been resolved at the city, so it should remain on this list. That's the purpose of the list until it is. But at the same time, while I was doing that, I discovered there were 2 additional items that had been removed from your list, and I'm not sure they're completed. One was MM 3613, fixing gaps in rent safe TO. The other item was IE 2616, transform TO, critical steps to net zero. Now, in their status on the previous report, it says work is pending further action from the city. So maybe we've achieved these, maybe they can be removed. I'm just throwing that out there. At the June 14 City Council meeting, the TCHC and Toronto Seniors Housing Corporation board appointments were confirmed, and that's indicated on the report before you. But there was also a new member's motion passed that is important and timely. And that the new motion that was passed at the June 14 council meeting was MM 7.8, was a request to implement an adequate temperature bylaw. This bylaw is currently in effect in both the city of Hamilton and Mississauga. Additional reporting back is at the city is due to their planning and housing committee, and then I guess back to council for consideration. So we do not currently have a tracking system to keep the board apprised of legislative changes at the provincial and federal level, which also can and do impact TCHC. So what I just wanted to give an example, because this is an important issue. The provincial government introduced a new housing bill, 97, helping home buyers protecting tenants acts. And they're proposing changes under the Residential Tenancy Act, Section 36, that would allow tenants to install a window or portable air conditioner in a rental unit where the landlord does not supply air conditioning. Now, that will be subject to certain conditions and exceptions. The goal is to ensure Ontario tenants have access to cooling through use of AC in their unit. Some of you may be aware it received royal assent June 8th, and final regulations are pending. This could significantly impact Toronto community housing. In fact, I think it will, as it potentially overrides the current mandate of no window ACs allowed at Toronto community housing. We do not currently have an AC policy. We have a one-liner mandate. So while provincial legislation trumps municipal, the city may still implement changes that will impact landlords to ensure appropriate unit temperatures during the summer months. So the reason I'm raising this is there's a previous member's motion, there's a brand new member's motion. It's quite serious and will have significant impacts on the corporation. But what I'm saying is there's no channel in which to communicate this to the board, and this seems to be the place. So I was only going to suggest that governance may wish to consider asking staff to expand this report to include legislative changes at the provincial and federal levels that may also impact TCHC, because otherwise this current legislation is not actually recorded anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Just see, are there any questions for our deputant here today? Seeing none, Catherine, thank you very much. That shows commitment to be here for 3 items, all 3. So thank you kindly.
Thank you.
So let's bring this into committee and just open it up. Any questions or comments for, yeah, Brian?
Just with regards, as we're going through this process of development moving on and other, I guess, looking at our mission of TCHC, which is really focused on tenants and their, their enjoyment of their, some of the directions that I think have come through from the city seem to be a bit beyond and sort of maybe in some ways a bit in conflict to our mission. I guess one of the ones that I might point to is the one around homelessness. Obviously a huge issue for the city, but I'm not quite sure how TCHC, solves that problem at the same time as trying to meet the needs of its tenants. So I guess I'm just concerned that as we are looking to the future in our strategic planning, that we try and sort of work out that relationship with the city in terms of their expectations on what TCHC is able to solve. I mean, we're not, and sometimes by imposing things on TCHC that we're required to do because they're our shareholder, it may take away from our ability to respond to our mission, which is to focus on the tenants that we have. So I guess at some point, I just think, we get these directives and obviously we need to, follow them because they're from our shareholder. But in some ways we need to have a discussion because I think it creates some challenges for us.
And for my part, just building on that, I would just say, the report here, this is obviously as it relates to past shareholder directions and council directions for our attention. And thank you to the staff for consolidating this because we know there are many motions moved all the time on many different topics. I think just on a forward-looking basis, our collective line of sight, while it's not this item here, it should be on our radar. To your point, Brian, I think there is with this council, and we have Councillor Cheng here as a member of it, but also with the now new mayor, no longer mayor-elect, both the wraparound service model as it pertains to addressing chronic homelessness, but also the mandate upon which the new mayor has stated is a priority, that being to build more housing, including more public housing. These will be items who undertakes that where? What's TCHC's involvement in the context of the shareholder and how the model works? I mean, these are certainly to be on our radar. It would be, I would suggest, and I know our staff team are on it, it would be better for us to be engaged with the shareholder early rather than after the fact responding to on some of these items. And I know that's top of mind. I think, frankly, having JAG sadly leaving us at Toronto Community Housing, but joining the city in a role that has oversight of some of these files is to our long-term benefit. Admittedly, on a sad note, because in the short term, we will not have them. So, but I think those, you flagged one, Brian, I would add the other, is this renewed mandate to build more public housing. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of broader affordable housing targets? What does that mean in terms of our existing assets? What does that mean in terms of meeting our target to get to a 25-75% market RGI splits? Lots to come.
Yeah, just not concerned, just want to flag it as a ongoing dialogue we need to have with our shareholder.
Yeah. Can I ask one question, which is simply, and this is again, I'm going to use the I'm new excuse for years, but just a question: where in the context of the organization extreme heat sits within our, whether it's on the development side or the capital repair side or the policy side? I'm just curious where that item sits. I know from my public health background, I know that this is a top of mind matter.
So I can start in terms of the specific question about provision of air conditioning to tenants within our portfolio. We did have a report actually that touched on the provincial legislation that Ms. Wilkinson referenced that went to the Tenant Services Committee at its meeting yesterday. There was a lively discussion of this issue at that committee. Ms. Wilkinson deputed, as did another tenant, in relation to that issue. And I think that primarily from the board governance perspective, we've treated that as a Tenant Services Committee issue. To some extent, it's an issue that impacts both our facilities management division and our operations division. There are structural, like the bricks and mortar aspects to providing cooling to tenants in our buildings, and then as well there's the impact that heat has on the tenants, and we try and deal with that through the operations division. But the issue generally in terms of interaction with the board on it is that it's gone through tenant services.
Understood. Okay. Okay. On the board, any other on this item? As Brian mentioned, and we both spoke about it, some items for future that we're going to have to be on our radar going forward. But anything else on this item in front of us?
I do wonder, like, so, you know, I'm a new counselor, so I'm learning how to navigate a lot of things, but I know that when I move motions, I have to chase them down. Otherwise, they can disappear into oblivion. So I think I'm just wondering, you know, when these things come up, who is tracking the TCHC impacting motions and the ones that, you know, are of concern to us? Is there someone on staff who does that, or is it our responsibility then to, you know, personally chase these down as well? And I'm happy to, like, if we identify some priority ones, I'm happy to play a role in that, but I think just to have clarity of, you know, where does this sit?
Paula, you're fearless team, I think, right?
So yeah, I get through the chair. We actually have a team that monitor all council meetings, all motions, and we track them, and we have a pretty rigorous process to making sure what the progress is against them within TCHC as well, which is kind of why we sort of update this report for every meeting so that you can see where things stands as it relates to the motion. But every time things come up, we're right on it in terms of making sure we edit the list and allocate it to the right department within Toronto Community Housing to be able to action it, and then circling back with the whomever councillor has actually put the motion forward as well.
Okay, so you actually do follow up when, because I noticed some of it says awaiting this department to do something. You're following up saying, hey, how's this one going? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I just wanted to say, like, if you encounter any obstacles, I'm here to offer my support to amplify any things that see are stalled and we need a little more progress. So please let me know.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Right. Anything else on this item? Otherwise, Paula, thank you to you and the team for the diligence in tracking all of this, and for the standing updates and the clarity there for me, Dara, just as I find my feet in terms of the reporting framework as it relates to extreme heat. And so that is this item. Would somebody like to move the recommendations? So as a standing report to receive it for information. Moved by Brian. All those in favor? Opposed if any, carried. Dara, unless I have something wrong, I believe that's the end of the formal agenda.
That's correct.
That's correct. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to staff. It is a beautiful day outside. I hope some people get some time to enjoy it. Not Lily, you work 24 hours a day. Welcome to the life of counselors. Thank you for that too. And look forward to seeing all of you at the board meeting in a couple weeks' time.
Thanks.